Well, welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you all to discuss achieving true accountability. I'm Rebecca and I'm the communications wizard here at Round Sky Solutions. And first off, I wanted to just kind of tell you a little bit about our work so you get to know us and what we're about. And then I'd like to hear from you all before we get started on the meat. So Round Sky is a worker-owned cooperative that works with leaders, aspiring leaders, and organizations that value and want to improve their democratic and collaborative processes in their teams, and also hone in on their leadership potential. And we do that through courses, coaching, and team or company-based trainings grounded in our collaborative operating system and processes, which we call CoLab, which you'll hear more about that system throughout this webinar. And so now that you kind of know who we are in a general sense, I wanted to give us some space to get to know who's on the call. And while you all put your name in the chat box, which should be in the right-hand side of your toolbar, a little chat box bubble, you can tell us your name, the city or place you're calling from today, and a little bit about what brought you here. And I'll start the little chat so you can see what it looks like. And it might pop up for you. And go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone. And I'll read a few out. And while you do that, I'll also share our slideshow. Great. Okay, so Allison's here. Hi, Allison. From New Orleans. She's the executive director of the National Police Accountability Project. Welcome. Nice. Glad to see you in here. And then Janet is here from Champlain Housing Trust. Awesome. Welcome. Great to have you here, which is in Vermont. So we have different representation from the states. Feel free to keep introducing yourself. Sometimes Zoom's chat is a little slow. So if I haven't seen it, feel free to keep doing that. And while you do that, while you get to know each other, feel free to comment on each other's welcomes. This is your space. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself a little bit more. Okay. So like I said, I'm Rebecca, the communications wizard at Round Sky, and I've been working with these folks for about a year. And what brought me to this work is the importance of process and structure to get us where we want to be. And I also wanted to enter more fully into the worker co-op movement to gain a better understanding of what economic justice looks like for me, as I come from a fragmented class background. And I currently live and have been in New Orleans for about 4 years. And I'm originally from California, which is where I'm physically at today in Oakland. And outside of Round Sky, I do anti-racist organizing with a collective and trying to make some time for dancing and visit my folks in California as often as I can. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today because accountability has come up in multiple contexts of my life. And when it's not working, it's been really uncomfortable to figure out how to move forward with some of the teams that I've been a part of, both in a work sense and also an organizing sense, or even just like a housing sense. So accountability is really important and it's kind of this big word that is thrown around a lot. So enough about me. Today's webinar will be led by Cecile, and I'll let her introduce herself to you all and tell us a little bit more about what brought this topic about achieving true accountability up for her.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm Cecile, one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions, and I live near Montpelier, Vermont. I've been a social entrepreneur for 30 years and have experienced a lot of challenging accountability situations. And really motivated by the waste of time, energy, and creativity that poor accountability represents, I was inspired to take up a deep dive into organizational and individual development in search of an answer. In particular, I was really curious what power is and developed some theories about power to map or explain the dynamics I commonly saw in organizations. I synthesized the research I'd been doing with my challenging career experiences, and from that research, I created a map of what organizations need to communicate about and a set of processes called collab that reliably deliver healthy forms of power in action, including much more fun, engaging, and productive accountability. So I also published Collaboration That Works, a ruthlessly practical handbook for a generative world, as a training manual that summarizes this research and introduces collab for organizations. So I'm delighted to be here with you, exploring the ways of truly achieving accountability in our work with each other. And today we're going to start by looking at why true accountability is so important, including looking at symptoms and causes, followed by exploring some of the myths around accountability that prevent us from obtaining true accountability. And then we'll introduce you to the 4 tips for achieving true accountability in your teams that we recommend you start with. And we'll wrap up with some next steps you can consider for yourself and a Q&A. So back to you, Rebecca, for logistics.
Great. And for just if you never used Zoom before, I'm just going to give you a little rundown. So if you have any questions, you can type them in the same chat box that you used to introduce yourself. And there's a function where you can chat to everyone, or you can just send one to me personally if you want, Rebecca Fisher McGinty. And I also take clarifying questions throughout the webinar, and the bigger questions I'll save till the end for a Q&A, which we'll save plenty of time for. And if you have any technical issues, you can ask via the chat box and I'll try to work them out with you as much as I can. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and shared with you along with the resources after this meeting. And you'll also get all the slideshow and all that stuff. So that's the rundown, and I'll stop there. So before we launch into the content of the webinar, I really wanted to get a sense of, for you to tell us what brought you here, in particular, how have you experienced accountability in your life? What are the moments that come up to you that brought you here? You can put that in the chat box, and I'll read a few of them out. And while you do that, I'll introduce some other people that have introduced themselves in the group chat, just in case folks can't see it or can't access that. There's Anna from the Biodynamic Association in Michigan. There's Stephen from Hopkinton from the Electrical R&D group. And Ryan is here. Adrian from Mexico City is here from Vientos Platform Co-op. Folks from New York, Maryland, great. And we have some answers here. So when team, board, organization, staff members don't carry out what they said they would do. Yeah, that's frustrating. Great, keep them coming. What kind of brought you here? What's your sense of accountability? What comes up for you? What are your experiences? And I'll give you a second. Someone else is interested that someone from the Police Accountability Project is part of the webinar. In my experience, police are not accountable. Yeah, that's definitely a tension, is how to get accountability in these huge systems that don't have a lot of oversight. And maybe Allison will put a link in there about where that comes from. There's a big history around it in New Orleans. And some folks are saying I do some work with condo association boards and members, and I've seen a number of problems around board members not following through and members not coming to meetings or voting, not showing up. You need someone to show up to get accountability. Accountability sometimes falls by the wayside in times of rapid growth. Absolutely. Great. Keep entering them, and we'll keep going. There's a lot we could say here, and I'm sure you will get a lot out of that conversation with each other. So with that, let's pass it back to Cecile.
Wonderful, thank you. It's really helpful to hear all of your experiences with accountability. So keep sharing them there. And truth is that so many of us have experienced frustrating or unworkable accountability. And just to quote a study here, the Workplace Accountability Study recently revealed that 82% of respondents have no ability to hold others accountable, but 91% rank it as one of their top development needs. So clearly this is high on our list of things that could change to make our workplaces more effective, more efficient, and more workable, essentially. I'll also mention a recent Inc. magazine article about a study at teams at Google listed psychological safety and dependability as the top first and second dynamics that characterize productive teams. So hugely important. And just to name a few top examples of common challenges with accountability from my experience, and I'll just contextualize this by saying that most of our work happens inside intact organizations and teams. But number one is missed opportunities. Really embarrassing and or expensive mistakes can be really common. I worked with a catering business that would frequently face having forgotten items upon their arrival at delivery site. And this, of course, cost the business money and credibility. Another one is invisibility. People don't feel appreciated for their work. And at the same time, people who actively try to hide to get away with doing as little as possible is really, happens a lot. One nonprofit that we worked with was surprised to find a key worker in the organization was doing a tremendous amount of work that only one other person in the organization really had a clue about. And discovering this not only enabled the team to more equitably redistribute work, but it also helped the individual in question feel seen and appreciated for their contributions. Another one is compromised follow-through. Really well-intentioned people can commit to a project, and I heard that in the comments just now, and then not follow through. An example I have from my experience is a college's strategic planning team was frustrated by the forgetfulness of the individual who said they would conduct some key research and simply didn't because they forgot, and they forgot to get it done. So another example, burnout and resentment. Some people work harder and get more done than others, including being given more work because they are capable. And this quote is pretty intense. In other words, their ability to perform becomes a detriment to them. So when you've got accountability issues, poorly performing people can essentially train others not to count on them. And that's a really devastating to those of us who work hard and for organizations that really need people to step up and contribute. So another example is inability to increase performance and achieve desired results. One manufacturing organization we had trained had trouble increasing sales according to plan because the individuals accountable were unable to put time into it. And so really accountability can falter even when expectations are clear, due to lack of clarity on how to prioritize our time. Another one, high turnover and or feeling trapped. When there's no good place for people to raise their tensions about accountability and get them processed, people can feel trapped in bad working conditions. An online education company faced unusually high turnover because there was no clear mechanism for addressing accountability issues with the owners. If people couldn't leave, if they couldn't address it, they left, or if they couldn't, they felt trapped, and that led to disengagement. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to go over the common causes of lack of accountability and to flesh this out a little bit and prepare us for thinking about the concrete solutions that we'll present in our tips. And you can use this as kind of a little test for yourself to see how many of these causes might be going on in your instance. So unclear expectations. One of the clients we've trained is a Russian bank, and their strategy team complained of the bickering and infighting that regularly occurred because their expectations about who was doing what were not aligned. Teammates didn't really know what was their work and what was not, and getting that all clear allowed much more generative conversations to happen. Another cause is lack of visibility into what teammates are working on. When we can't see what someone else is up to, it's much easier to assume that they aren't getting much done, even if they are. So here's an example. When a team of technicians at a radio station realized that they didn't really know what projects everyone was up to, this allowed them to do an exercise to surface all the projects and then align them strategically. Another cause is expectations that are generated from the top down only. So when orders about what one is supposed to do come only from the top, accountability suffers. And here's a real life example and a quote from a business owner that we trained. And I'll read these quotes just for those who may be listening in audio only mode. In 11 years as a business owner, I had not found the kind of help I needed to work towards this objective. Some of my primary objectives as a business owner were to share power and to avoid the abuse of power. And I failed at both of them time and again, causing a great deal of suffering for myself, to others, and to the capacity of the business to serve us all. So simply put, when one doesn't know how to generate expectations from the input of all impacted, the ability to be accountable and engaged decreases. Another common cause is having too many projects being worked on at the same time. And I'm going to guess that every one of us on this call knows what this feels like. So yeah, constant state of having too much to do and all of it being important. And when one lives in this kind of situation, being able to deliver on one's commitments, even if one knows what they are and intends to do so, becomes compromised, along with our health. Another cause is information that's needed for work is not available or requires extra effort to get it. For example, imagine a landscaping company trying to plant a big tree with a huge root ball and accidentally hitting the gas line, causing an explosion and injuries to workers and the property of the homeowner. And if the company had simply been clear on who was accountable for calling to get the lines marked, this would have avoided the accident altogether. Another common cause is people being assigned to roles they are not qualified for or a good fit. When people are promoted for political reasons, not for their skills and capacities, or when people have to pick up roles due to being in constrained financial conditions, one can count on accountability issues. For example, in one small startup where there were only 3 people on staff, the marketing role was given to someone with little marketing experience, and on top of that, a deeply seated distaste for marketing, and the results were lackluster sales. And one more cause is no clear deadlines, goals, or priorities, or consequences for not meeting them. When there's a sense that it doesn't matter when one gets to a project, or that there are no consequences to not doing so for oneself or one's team or the organization, getting stuff done can fall prey to procrastination. Lack of super clear priorities in the same manner works in the same manner and allows people to focus on the work that they are interested in versus the work that the organization really needs them to get done now. So super clear priorities are really important. And lack of performance reviews or feedback. Performance reviews and regular opportunities for feedback, both positive and negative, are critical to accountability, along with processes for personal development requests that come out of those conversations. One team found itself held hostage by an individual who consistently underdelivered due to personal development issues, and without the performance reviews and concrete safe opportunities for feedback, the team was stuck. So accountability is a huge issue in most teams, and it's interesting to see what people commonly assume will fix these issues, because there are some myths about what it's going to take. And I'm just going to go over those for you all. So, part of the point for sharing these myths is just for you to get accountability in your teams. We want you to sort of understand your own thinking and the thinking of your team. And sometimes people think these will help, but on their own, they rarely do. So first myth is that it mostly has to do with having the right people on a team. This really reflects the bias that accountability mostly has to do with individual performance. And while there is some truth in this, certainly is, it fails to recognize the huge role that systems and processes play in enabling accountability. And the problem with relying on individual performance is that most people are not particularly adept at balancing multiple competing priorities under pressure without getting overwhelmed and underproducing. So accountability systems, which I'll talk about in the tips, are critical really to creating a foundation for accountability that supports people in delivering on their commitments. Next myth, if we just had more money. Oh my goodness, yes, could solve all our problems, right? Well, again, this is partially true. It certainly would help in some ways. Maybe you could hire more people, but the consequence of that is that even if you did fire underproducers and hire people to fill those gaps, a team still has to be accountable to each other and staying aligned and productive to each other. And adding a new person into that mix only really adds further confusion. So starting by aligning your accountability systems can save you time and money, even in the short run. And another myth, we don't really have the power to hold others accountable unless we're the manager. And this is common enough that it showed up in that quote that I listed earlier, that we really don't have the power to hold others accountable unless we're the manager. And it's true that in most organizations, managers have more power than others on a team, but most managers don't really know how to hold others accountable and struggle with figuring this out themselves. So a set of practices that enable collaborative accountability can be key for both team leads and all the team members simultaneously. So today I'm going to show you 4 tips out of the dozens that we've researched and synthesized into the collaborative operating system called CoLab that we teach. And these are the top 4 we recommend starting with and hope you give them a try. I do want to contextualize that by saying that implementing this kind of stuff in organizations can be a tricky affair. And so we recommend that you consider further training and support during this transformation. All right, so off to the tips. Our first tip for you all really has to do with clarifying expectations. We've mentioned that a few times already in the call. When we know what's expected of us, it's far easier to be accountable to those expectations. So let's take a moment to talk about what roles are and how to make them clear, really, because that's the challenge. Roles in CoLab are a specific arena of work defined by accountabilities, and that's all written out and clear. And you can see an example of a role that we'll send you in our follow-up email. And there are several keys to sort of making roles work well. The first is to develop the roles with the whole team. Roles are best developed and passed by the whole team because the whole team is impacted by these roles. And everyone on a team then knows what everyone else is accountable for and has a chance to buy in or provide objections, make changes so that it does work for them and the team. Another tip for roles is that roles should equal autonomy and accountability. This is often missing in teams. Roles are often created in one's job description and then tucked in a drawer and hardly referenced at all, and certainly don't necessarily confer full autonomy and accountability. So having roles confer that autonomy to deliver on the work, but it really only works if you have some of the aspects of a strong accountability system in place, like our ops reports, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the other thing about roles is that projects should fall within roles. If we have projects nest under specific roles, this leads us easily up into our next tip, which is about the ops reports. So if we have the clear roles into which all our projects fall, with projects being a body of work that has a defined end, so it has a beginning and an end, then reporting on these projects on a regular basis, the whole team produces an increase in productivity because most people prefer to show up to report having accomplished what they said they would. So another benefit is visibility. Ops reports produce an ability to see what's happening. And we get to both appreciate good work done and ask questions and raise tensions about work that's not been done. Another thing that happens when we include ops reports is that we're able to align our priorities. Really, we can easily rank order our projects in alignment with our current strategy. Once we know what our strategy is, what our simple set priorities are. And when we line up our projects with our top targets, top 1 through 5 projects, and share that with the team, we can regularly stay focused on what's most important to the team instead of ending up spending time on stuff that's not strategically relevant at the moment. So here's tip number 3, the task tracking system. And the importance of this is really that in our current day and age, it's impossible for us to keep track of all the details of a complex and fast-paced work agenda without an external memory system for keeping track of it all. And so really set your team expectations for each individual to have a task tracking system of their own. I highly recommend the system be transparent to everyone on the team and visible in real time, so you can use it during your ops reports as a visual for your projects. The advantage of a team-based virtual or offline task tracking system is that it's easier to get all team members on board and to monitor their progress. Mistakes or missed tasks can be much more quickly and easily spotted and accounted for. And this kind of transparency works for most people to significantly increase their accountability, since it virtually eliminates the response, "Oops, I forgot about that task." So on to tip 4, our role to soul fit. Once you have your roles clear on a team and are using the ops reports and task tracking, if you want to achieve the highest level of productivity and accountability, getting people into those roles that are the best fit in terms of capacity, skills, and personality is highly effective. The trouble with roles filled by people who either can't do the work or don't like to do that particular work is that you and they will always be swimming upstream. And it's much more tempting to fall into procrastination when the work you have laid out in front of you is difficult, or you lack the training to do it well, or it makes you inherently uncomfortable. So finding the right people for the roles is critical to sustaining excellent accountability. So the place to begin with this is to get all of your work expectations clear and to know which talents are needed for which roles. And then with a simple analysis of every individual in an organization, pairing people with the roles that are a good fit for them is much, much easier. So let's spend just a few minutes about talking about what are some of the benefits of making the efforts to get true accountability on your team, because it can be challenging, but it's well worth the effort. Imagine what it might be like for you to have an organization full of inspiring leaders with tools that enable you to hack your workflows into effective outcomes. Well, for one thing, improving your accountability will save you time and energy and open up the space for everyone on the team to be more of their full selves, which simply feels better and frankly gets better results. So I'm going to read these quotes again for the benefit of those of you who are on audio only, and these are some of the things you can look forward to. Working together productively with flow and satisfaction. So I now feel invigorated and excited to work with my business partners, and our work contributes to a meaningful practice of providing service to others while also caring for ourselves. Without this new framework and tools, I would not be in this position. So yeah, working in collaboration with others can be profoundly frustrating, and that frustration is simply a drain on both organization and individual. Getting to flow and satisfaction produces a host of benefits, including longevity as well. In other words, people stick around to contribute to an organization's success. Another benefit is mutual support and accountability. So here's the quote: "Collab provide to be the exact prescription necessary to aid us in our problems of inefficiency, lack of accountability, unclear roles, and management structure. The system has organic roots that speak to the basics of human organization while simultaneously embracing technologies that allow us to prioritize and systematize in our daily lives. I found these techniques to be very straightforward and succinct while allowing for necessary flexibility. So one of the biggest challenges of collaborative work environments where we are explicitly sharing power is accountability, both how we support each other in getting our work done and how we hold each other accountable in the process. Another benefit is a real distribution of power and voice. This one is huge. If you really want to get to accountability and feel some meaningful engagement from your team, try giving them some real power. And here's a testimonial from a manager in a 70-person radio station that we just trained. I just wanted to say that adopting the tools you trained us with has really changed how my team operates. I know that others here can say the same, but specifically for my team, it's been invaluable. These tools give everyone on my team a mechanism to air any issue, tension, question, frustration, or idea. And the open voting ensures that the most important topics get the most time. It also helps my team hold me, the director, accountable. I can't simply ignore issues or questions, even if I wanted to, and I don't, because they can keep adding it to the agenda and keep voting it up for discussion. So another benefit is not getting stuck on the issues. With your guidance, you turned what could have been at best a jumbled waste of time, or perhaps worse, a clash of perspectives, into a constructive reorientation of the focus of my group. In my mind, that was a turning point for the productivity of our team and the success of our work. So the feeling of being stuck in one's work with others is corrosive, especially if it's a consistent feature of meetings. And being able to move forward, even on difficult issues, is like opening the windows in a room and letting some fresh air and light in. And for me, the best part about learning all of this is that you're going to be able to use these skills over and over again in all kinds of contexts. We've applied collab in environments from small housing cooperatives to farming cooperatives to giant banks to nonprofits that work across New England. So as far as we can tell, the applications are anywhere that you can think of to apply it within an intact team. So it really kind of enables us to have superpowers for enabling people to get along and do better work together. So to just summarize these tips briefly, role clarity, first place to start, ops tracker, ops reporting, second place to start, the individual task tracking system, and the role to soul fit. So I'm hoping you can see how easy it is to get true accountability when you know what goes into it. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to tell you about an opportunity to learn how to do this through our online course, our Collaborative Leadership Certification Program, which is designed to help you integrate these kinds of tools and embody facilitative leadership. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Rebecca, to tell us a little bit about the Collaborative Leadership Certification Program.
Great, thanks, Cecile. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about this so that you can understand if this is the right step for you. So you can learn about this program and know if this will solve the issues that you're having. So the Collaborative Leadership Certification Program is our intensive program that is a remote learning course. So wherever you are, you can take it. And currently, I'm the staff member that's in it, which is kind of awesome to talk about now. So I'll start with telling you a little bit about each lesson that we go through. So the first module is grounding in the why of what of collaborative leadership. And in this, you'll add the following to your tool belt. You'll learn some effective processes for knowing what you and your team need in any situation and how to get there, including when accountability gets tricky. It's a dynamic process, right? And it includes tools and skills for facilitating productive and inclusive meetings for shared and self-organized teams, which means saving a lot of time. Once you can facilitate productive meetings, it can save some time for you. And then learning how to leverage shared power in your team for social change to get more aligned energy and engagement from all team members. essentially, engagement often means more accountability. If people feel invested in and feel that they have power in their teams, they're more likely to be accountable. At least that's true for me. Okay, and then the next module, number 2, is crafting the workable collaborative accountability system. So we have a whole lesson on this, and it's to learn, you'll learn how to use openness and transparency to build team trust and cohesion. And you'll integrate your own project to upgrade, or if you don't have one, implement your own task tracking system for accountability. And you'll learn how to set up and understand the importance of collective task tracking for your team, where it doesn't feel like micromanaging, but it's really a process together. And you'll have an understanding of an ability, tools to know how to define your roles in your team in a way that's really productive for you, and not just a list of tasks, but the things that you have power to make decisions on, including how to shift that for your team as it changes. So a distributed and agile governance around roles, if that makes sense. So the next module, and feel free to write down questions if you're not following me, so the module 3 is understanding skills and inclusive facilitation. So through lots of dialogue, practice, and feedback in your small cohort, you'll learn how to build your facilitation skills, including managing difficult people or difficult times with people, working with the power of conflict, and communicating with clarity. And you'll understand some tools to guide you as you integrate multiple perspectives while also building up your team's strength together, rather than dividing into black and white ideas, dichotomous ideas. And you'll gain confidence to facilitate a participatory process to get the results that you want and make progress on your goals. And we have 2 more modules. The next one is practicing and refining your skills, your facilitative leadership skills. And we want to make sure that this program is really hands-on, so we want to make sure that you have time to implement and get feedback on what you're learning. So we spend a whole module working out all the nitty-gritty details through practicing, facilitating, and integrating that shared task tracking system, and then honing in on the skills and answering those lingering questions to facilitate the meetings that are giving you trouble, or that might give you trouble. And then practice ways to manage unhealthy power dynamics in the moment. Managing power is a dynamic process, so I think we're always getting better at learning how to manage that. So this is really about honing in on how do we get better at managing that when it happens, since we don't live in bubbles, right? And then the last module is about integrating, completing, and moving forward. So in this section of the course, you will set up a clear plan to keep yourself accountable, to integrate, embody, and remember these new skills and tools. And you'll also learn how to use these tools to track your own progress and set up the processes and spaces for your team to see your collective growth, and with plenty of affirmation and feedback from your small cohort and your instructor. So I'll go into some of the results, and then after this, we'll take questions about anything that we talked about in this webinar. So through this program, which you can sign up for right now, it's on a rolling basis, you'll get some of the following results. So the first is grow healthy, powerful leadership, and you'll be able to piece together all that you've learned in the past and throughout the program to see real and sustained progress in your personal development. We take a really integrative approach. So it's not just what you learn with us, but it's also what can you bring from all the other experiences that you've had. And then you'll be engaging your values within all aspects of your life and work commitments. I think part of accountability is being able to live in your values in your work, and so really connecting those 2 things. And we'll also work to discover the power of rapid collective decision-making in a complex way, so not a yes or no way, but in a what way would work for your team moving forward, which we call integrative consent. Feel free to email me if you have questions about that, but that's a pretty powerful tool and pretty simple. And then you'll be able to harness the power of distributed, agile governance to make sustainable and crucial changes that maybe you didn't think were possible. And you'll learn effective processes that guide you to use the energy of the collective to make those decisions. So not just one person making decisions. You'll learn and practice how to facilitate productive meetings. And you'll get workable and effective accountability for yourself and your team with our tools. And you'll use these skills over and over and over again. So, great. And these are some of the extras of the course. So you'll get the instructional manual to use the processes. There's so many that aren't gone over in the course. And then you'll also have this new community of people who are practicing this so that you can bounce ideas off of, and you'll get lots of feedback. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. We have some generous scholarships, and if you're in Vermont, you may be eligible for a full scholarship. So reach out to us for sure. And that link is right here, roundskysolutions.com/CLCP1. So great. With that, I'd like to circle back to any questions or comments you have. Since we have so many of us on the call, I'd like to ask you to type the questions in the chat box, and I'll pick a few. And if we don't pick yours, we'll follow up via email, and we'll try to figure that out together. So feel free to put any questions in the chat box. And we'll give you some time. Oops. And sometimes this doesn't immediately update for me, so just give that some time. And I guess while you all think of what's still coming up for you, I guess, Cecile, I'd like to hear what, how you see accountability working for remote teams. A lot of people on this call mentioned in their registration that they're in remote teams and they're possibly in that transition from an office to remote. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously really tricky. You know, we've grown up in environments, many of us, where we worked, you know, next door, right next door to someone, and could easily just sort of check in with them. So there is an adaptation to virtual environments, and I would say that the key things in virtual environments are to have those the ops tracker and the ops reports as part of your meeting structure. And so the ops tracker, essentially think of it can be as simple as a spreadsheet, and we'll send you out a link to a template of one that we've made up that's worked well enough for us so far. I can also recommend task tracking systems like Asana and Trello and Podio. Those are all systems that everyone can sort of see what everyone else is up to and what they're doing. And that's very powerful, especially for virtual teams where you're not going to get that next door cubicle effect. So highly recommend those as tools that you use. And the key to instituting that, there's two steps. One is that everyone's using it and that it's being used in your meetings as part of the meeting structure. You actually open up that tracker, you look at it, you have each person go through and report on their projects. And those projects should be visible on the screen. If they're not, you can give them a minute to get them up there, but that really drives the practice of the tool if it's put into use on a regular basis. people will learn that, oh, meeting's next, tomorrow, and I need to update my tasks so that I can report on them properly. The other thing I would recommend if you're getting something like this into place for your team is that you put a project on everyone's list of integrating your new task tracking system. And they then have to report on where are they at in the process of integrating that until they're done. And integration means essentially it's working in all of their work environments. So that's a really helpful trick to sort of getting it to happen. And the other key thing, I'll just circle back to it again, it really has to be everyone on a team. You can't have one person sort of skipping out on it. And the way to drive that is through putting them on the hot seat and being like, here, we're looking at your tracker. What are your projects? Oh, you haven't filled it in. Let's fill it in right now together. So they can't sort of slip away and not do it.
Great, thanks, Cecile. That's really helpful. And we have a question coming in. My chat box is moving a bit. Okay. Do you ever switch up your method of ops report? We find that after a few months of using a particular format, people start tuning out during those and it feels stagnant. She says that we've gone through a few formats over the year and this happens always. Any suggestions for keeping ops reports fresh?
Yeah, great question. Well, the key word in there for me was stagnant. And the question that it raises for me is, do you have the right people? Do you have the people who are doing work together, reporting together? Because if you have people who are working on different teams and they're all kind of reporting, you're going to lose people's attention. My attention drifts when someone reports on a project that doesn't have something directly to do with the work I'm doing. So that is the place to look at the first start is who are the members of your meetings, and are they meeting around work that is theirs, that they have some accountability towards? And if you don't, then that's what I would change who you have meeting so that you're in small enough teams that the work that people are reporting on is relevant. So that's sort of the first thing. And back to your first question about, the switch up the method of ops reports. Yes, there's all kinds of different ways to do this. There's all kinds of different classes of information to report on in ops reports, everything from recurring tasks to metrics. And the key thing is to identify, again, what's really relevant for your team. And for some teams, much of the work is simply recurring tasks. So you would want to include recurring tasks in your ops report. For other teams, those are a minor backdrop and they might be helpful sometime, but really it's the projects that are the most relevant. So identifying what type of information is the most relevant and staying focused on that can also be really helpful. The other key thing is to keep your ops reports succinct, and this is challenging for people. This is another place where attention can really drift. If someone is going on and on and on, it's not helpful. So we like to invite everyone to report on a project briefly. What did they do in the last week and what do they intend to do going forward? And the whole report on a single project should take 30 to 45 seconds. So that's really quick. And they need to hit the high points. So you can see that that's going to be a challenge for some people. And what we found is that through practice, people get better, but it's really, really important to have a facilitator who will continually bring them back to the point and be like, hey, hang on, that's too much information, high points only. Okay, let's move on to your next project. What did you do last week? What do you intend to do going forward? So that sort of structure of a facilitator guiding someone through their ops reports is very, very helpful. With the goal of it being succinct. So those are a few thoughts. I hope they're helpful.
If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to put them in.
Rebecca, I'll actually add one more to that piece about the structure of ops reports. Some teams find that it's better to have written ops reports. And so they will produce a document, say on Friday, that's the summary of what they've done. Same structure, what have they done? What do they intend to do going forward? Succinct, we don't want pages and pages. but that goes out in an email, and then it's everyone's job to read that before they attend the meeting. And then the ops reports simply become a round of questions, comments, and appreciations for everyone. And that can reduce a lot of in-meeting time on ops reports. So it's a really helpful trick for some teams. What it does is increase offline time, out of meeting time, and writing that report is obviously more time consuming than an oral report. But sometimes it's just better for a team.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it definitely depends on your team. For our team, we're much more verbal reporters, works better for us. Yeah. But perhaps it could work better for your team to do more writing. And another question came in, Cecile, is what's the best way to get buy-in for self-management practices, especially for teammates who are new to it? I often find myself in the role of holding all the tools and structures, like being the only one using or currently in Asana.
Yes, gotcha. Mm-hmm. And that can be really frustrating. And so what I would suggest is that you use an integrative consent as a shared decision-making process to align around what are the core self-management practices that you're going to integrate. And then you might need to prioritize. If depending on where your team's at in its development, you may want to start with one, then move to the next, rather than do them all at once, because that can get a little overwhelming. But let's take Asana for yourself as an example. You might come to a meeting with your teammates and be like, here's my proposal. I propose that in order for us to be more effective self-managing team, I want to have Asana be the tool of choice across our entire team. And then you take that proposal through integrative consent, which has time for questions, comments, and objections. And at the end, you have a proposal that works well enough for that team. It's not going to make everyone happy. Let's be clear about that. We're not trying to please everyone. We're trying to get something that works in the best interest of the organization or for the whole team. And so with that in mind, then someone who's, say tech averse is still going to be brought on board and have to adapt, have to do their own personal development to get to that point where they can use it. And you could use that same approach with any of the other sort of modules of effective self-management, one piece at a time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the key thing that I really heard there is getting consent from your team to do it.
Yeah.
Then once they've agreed, instead of you trying to convince them, if you can get consent, then that's the way to go.
Yeah.
And all the other things comes with that also, that Cecile said. Did you want to add something, Cecile?
I was just going to say, it's important to get those kinds of decisions written down. And one of our other webinars kind of goes over the living agenda structure and our standard meeting practice. And those are really key tools. They would frankly be the place I would have you start rather than Asana if you haven't integrated something like that already. Because it gives you the real foundations for making decisions together collaboratively and having them recorded. And it really builds that buy-in, which is super critical to every team, but especially critical for self-managing teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And he says, thanks, I appreciate the run-through. Absolutely. And this wasn't quite a question, but it was a comment earlier, and that maybe other folks have experienced this, and you can say something about it, Cecile, is when coworkers or volunteers engage in aggressive behavior, microaggressions, or other practices that aren't in line with the organization's values, and wondering how to hold folks lovingly accountable, calling them in and helping them to shift or transform.
Yeah.
The organization's values or the team's values.
Yeah, that's a really, really rich question. And it might be helpful if I had a few more examples. So if you feel comfortable doing so, feel free to share that in the chat box. But I'll sort of start off the top of my head. When I see those kind of microaggressions or lashing out at a colleague, to me, that's a red flag that there are underlying issues in a team, period. And those could be structural or they could be interpersonal. So if they're structural, you want to start with the structural issues. So let's say you had a team member who was lashing out at another person. As the facilitator, I would turn to them and say, sounds like you're having a challenging time right now. Can you tell me what's underneath your frustration? And I would help them identify what that tension is, and I would get that tension up on the agenda for addressing as its own clear, explicit thing. And I would work towards resolving, and creating essentially new patterns so that whatever's creating that is no longer creating that. That's been resolved. Once you've sort of resolved the basic structural issues in a team and you're still getting that type of flare-up, then you can look at an interpersonal tension clearing process. And that's a very powerful process that focuses primarily on having the person who is having a strong emotional reaction be validated by the person or persons that are providing a trigger for them. And we write more about that, and you can look up more in terms of how that process really flows. But the basic idea is that it's a very safe, very structured container, and the goal of it being restored relationship between two or more people. And the path to getting there is through validating the emotional experience of an individual, not through getting the facts clear, not through, it's not about arguing, it's not about trying to create a new pattern, it's really just about the emotions. And that sort of release then can often bring more clarity when you circle back to the structure conversation to figure out new creative ways to make things work better.
Yeah. Thanks, Cecile. We have time for maybe one or two more questions if anybody wants to pop them in the group chat. We have just a little bit more time. And I'll also put our emails up here for you if you would like to send us an email. If you have any questions about something we talked about today, we'll do our best to answer them. It's easier in person, but the email is fine too. Great. Somebody says that she has a next meeting in a few minutes, and thanks for the information. Great.
You're very welcome.
Last chance. And I'll kind of wrap up our call with just a little thing that I've learned from working within the system for the last year is that it takes a little time to get used to this different culture of reporting out, and have a structure around accountability is a culture that you create in your team and that you get accustomed to. So I think changing patterns for a team is really shifting that culture. So if the culture of your team is there's a lack of accountability, the structures start creating a new culture for you, and those can always shift. And with all shifts, time is needed. Yeah, all shifts in a team, you need to really give it a fair chance to see if it works for your team, and then you change it, unless it's clearly not working. But that's kind of how we operate. Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. It was great to have you. Feel free to open your unmute yourselves and say goodbye and anything else that you'd like. And we have our next webinar on next week on the 23rd on navigating founder syndrome and working between founders and teams. So tell your friends. Okay.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Great to be here with you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.